Why, hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons & Dragons. I'm the dwarf boy, Pete.
And I'm not the dwarf boy, Jeremy?
Just because I love dwarves, and we're going to be talking about them today, among other things.
Pete, before we talk about dwarves, I think we got to answer someone in chat. Delnith, my friend, that is our theme song, performed by Peter.
Yeah, I made that on the computer and using instruments. It's just a instrumental version of our theme song that we do on Fridays, the Pete and Jeremy's D&D theme song.
Yeah, but it's not the regular theme song because this isn't D&D Time. It's D&D Time Talks, where, yeah, Pete and I are going to talk about all sorts of different cool stuff. I mean, today, I think, hopefully you already know this, but we're going to be talking mostly about the Tome of Foes. Specifically, we're going to talk about Dwarves, Gith, Halflings, and Gnomes, otherwise known as chapters 3 through 5.
Yes.
These are some pretty cool chapters. We have I've got my qualms, but overall, I don't know. I had a lot of fun reading it. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit. In particularly, I already knew I was gonna like some of the stuff going into it because I already, as I said, love the dwarves, and I also very much love halflings. So I was extremely excited to go into those two chapters in particularly. I don't feel like they disappointed, but we'll go into more of the details as we start getting into it.
Yeah. And if you are interested in talking and joining in the conversation, feel free to type along in the chat. We'll be paying attention and talking with you guys. And if you have anything you want us to talk about on this show, feel free to let us know.
Next week is probably going to be our last week on Mordenkainen and Tome of Foes, where we start covering the bestiary. I think me and Jeremy are going to pick out a few monsters each that we really love and go into detail on them. And we'll probably just talk about our thoughts on it as a whole as well to some extent. But after that, we're going to be back in fishing for ideas. So if you got anything, definitely tell us.
Spoiler alert, it's a good book.
Yep, it's good.
But before we dive into tonight's topic, let's quickly answer that one question that's on everyone's mind. Can we play Tome of Foes races in D&D time? And the answer is yes. All of them are good to go. Wizards of the Coast, I think, we didn't talk about race options very much in our kind of overview of the different sections, but I think Wizards did a really great job of making very reasonably balanced races here. Nothing feels like it just stomps over any other existing race option. I think it's really cool. Good, they really interesting options.
Yeah, they really kind of leaned into that tiefling design style where a lot of the races use that, like, you get spells that progress at the early levels, is kind of a consistent design choice they made, and it works.
And Reflected Tonight, don't you worry, bud. We'll play the theme song again at the end just for you.
Yeah, you already know it. It's not like a new one. It's the Jazz D&D Time thing, which you already have heard, I'm sure.
I've never heard it before. Anyway, Pete, let's dive right into this topic unless we have more to talk about.
No, I don't think we have more to talk about. So mind if I take it away?
Please, Pete.
We're going through a pretty huge chunk of Tome of Foes tonight. We're going chapter 3, which is the dwarves and Jeremy, what is the correct pronunciation? I've heard a couple of things. I've heard Durgar, I've heard Dwergar, I've heard Dvergar with like that V sound. Do you know what the correct is?
It's not Dvergar. I know
Dvergar feels really good though to say.
It feels good. I'm pretty sure it's just Durgar. Is the pronunciation. Yeah. I could be wrong, but that is how I have always heard it. That's how I've always said it.
Dwarves and Durgar. So that's the chapter 3. Chapter 4 was the Gith and the Endless War, which we'll talk about the Githyanki and the Githzerai and their kind of feud. And then the lightest chapter in the book, the Halfling section in particularly, my favorite whole section of the book. Halflings and Gnomes, which we're going to be talking about all of those. So we'll be moving through a little bit quickly than we have the last couple of weeks. Also, because these chapters are a little bit less dense than the chapter on Devils and Demons and the chapter on Elves. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the content, but more than that, we're going to be talking about our own opinions and what we think, has value to put into your own games, and just, what impact the book's going to have on our own games moving forward and stuff like that.
Yeah. The big things we're going to be covering, right, is from a dungeon master's perspective, how valuable is it, and from a player's perspective. And Pete, I don't think I'm spoiling too much by saying this book is great for both players and dungeon masters. You don't have to be a DM to get a ton of awesome role-playing kind of
character ideas abound.
Stuff. That good stuff that you want.
Yeah, I mean, it has literal player content in it, like races and stuff you can pick.
Course,
so.
But yeah, let's I guess let's dive right in.
So yeah,
I think just before we
chunk it.
Well, before we chunk it, let's just hit the broad arc here. Pete, how did you like these chapters?
We've tipped our hand a bit. I liked these chapters. Actually, that's not completely true. I really loved the dwarf chapter. I really loved the halfling chapter. The Gith, the halfling subchapter. The Gith, I was kind of iffy on. I'm not going to say like I hated it or anything. I don't even want to say I disliked it. It just didn't, excite me like the other chapters did. And then the gnomes, I was again kind of medium on. Jeremy, I believe you were even lower on the gnome chapter.
Yeah, I was lower on the gnome pole. Oh God, I was trying to get totem pole and gnome together. Gnome.
I was all right. You're good.
I butchered that. I really loved the dwarves. I loved the halflings. They knocked
the halfling chapter was so good.
I liked the Gith chapter, but I have some qualms that we're going to talk about when we get to the Gith. And the gnome chapter, man, I liked what they did with the Force Gnomes, but it was like half a page of text total. It was really short, and the whole rest of the chapter felt like a bit of an afterthought. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, because Pete and I think share the opinion here.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought that these three chapters were the most fun to read so far. I loved the Devils and Demons, but it was a very long, a lot of lore, which can be hard to wade through. Elves, I thought, was a little too detailed, which is fine, but harder to read. These, I thought, were pretty much on point.
Dwarves in particular were dead on, just right.
Perfect amount of lore and detail without going over the top. Super easy and super fun to read. But yeah, let's lead us off. Let's talk about the Dwarves and Durgar. They're their first chapter 3.
Yes, so chapter 3 kind of follows the nature, and you start to see a pattern here. And just on kind of a grander scale, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, for a brief moment, all of a sudden made sense to me. Because I didn't read ahead or know anything that was going to happen in later chapters. And I was like, oh, wait, these are all people that are at war. And so it's the elves and the drow, then the dwarves and the Durgar, and then the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai. And I had this sudden moment where I was like, oh my God, did they put the halflings and the gnomes at some kind of incredible war? And they don't. But in the dwarf chapter, it kind of follows the same structure that they had with the Devils and Demons and then with the elves, where they talk about a little bit about the feud between the dwarves and the Durgar. Then they talk about, the culture of each respective race in time. They talk about the gods of both chapters, and then they end it with tables and the race for Durgar, which is kind of the same pattern. They'll see it repeated in the Gith section as well, although they don't have gods, and then in the Halfling and Gnome section, although they don't have the conflict. Yeah, so you want to talk about a little bit of the lore of what dwarves are, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's heard of dwarves to some degree. They appear all throughout fantasy and actual historical mythos, dating back to Norse mythology and everything. I mean, dwarves have just always been around, and unsurprisingly, Dungeons and Dragons has a very similar kind of feel. Dwarves are all about the forge and creation. And I think they did a really cool job of really emphasizing the dwarven mindset in this text. They talk a lot about how dwarves value things not necessarily for their material value as much as necessarily what they are, the accomplishment that it would take to make that. Their children are their most prized possessions, not like how a human parent might view a child as like their successors. No, the dwarves value their children because those children will eventually grow up to make grander and greater things and be a legacy. It's part of this greater legacy that they're building. It's always, everything ties back to that building, and all ties back to their kind of chief god, Moradin, who built them.
Which I love, that little chunk.
Yeah, and all of dwarf culture revolves around that, whether it be the clans building their strongholds and then all working together as a community to build the greatest, grandest strongholds. Only grand from the inside, though. On the outside, they're boring and plain, but that's unrelated. Whether we're talking about that, whether we're talking about the overall just accomplishments of their clans, they do a decent job, actually a great job of really going into that and giving it a lot of depth and tying it all together. At the same time, though, they demonized the shit out of Moradin.
Yeah, Moradin came out of this looking a little bit rough. And in order to get into that, you have to talk about the Durgar first. So what the Durgar are very similar to what the Drow are to the Elves. They are these sort of gray-skinned dwarves that dwell in the Underdark, and they get into how the Durgar came to be. What happened essentially in the lore is they were a dwarven clan that were kind of roped in by an elder brain, by mind flayers, and these kind of psychic powers that convinced them that there were treasure deep beneath the earth, and they just started relentlessly digging downward, abandoning their home, abandoning their stronghold, abandoning their temples to Moradin. And eventually they reached the bottom, and they spent a long time enslaved by these mind flayers and by this elder brain. Eventually their leader, who would later become their deity, their figure, Ladugar is the deity's name, was a dwarf who kind of rallied for help. He sought help from Asmodeus and got power to fight off the mind flayers. And eventually, upon kind of defeating the mind flayers and reclaiming their place, they moved to return back up, higher up into the surface, out of the Underdark, and then were rejected by the other dwarven clans who saw that they had abandoned their temples to Moradin, which they had become these like really greedy kind of hollow dwarves, but being then rejected when they tried to return and like reclaim their old life was the thing that kind of sent them into this kind of permanent evil spiral. And it makes Moradin come across as very strangely cold and callous to his people. And really just like he seems very clearly in the wrong here, as they were tricked into going downwards, and then upon like freeing themselves were completely rejected. Like I said, it comes off harsh.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it makes sense actually as you're reading it, right? Because they've taken the time to set up the incredible importance of family and clan and diligence and vigilance that the Durgar, who kind of let their guard down, let the greed, the kind of greedy bait of the mind flayers get to them. It makes sense. It's just really harsh. It's kind of the opposite, right, of Corellon with the elves, because in the elf chapter, they go to great lengths to be like, Corellon loves the elves. Corellon's a great god. Corellon's the best. But the deeper backstory to that is like, well, Corellon didn't give a shit about the elves and was a very absent god for a long time, that they just totally gloss over in this book. It's just weird that like they go to great lengths to not deify Coralon and then just throw Moradin under the train.
Morden did not come out of this one looking good.
Off the bridge of Khazad-dûn with you, brother. But yeah, I mean, overall, one of the things I really loved about the dwarf section, don't get me wrong, I love dwarves. I think they're my favorite race to play for the most part. Yeah, Infinite Talkers, Coralon's a little flaky.
Oh yeah.
But one of the things I love the whole dwarf chapter. I love playing dwarves. I think they really did a great job giving the Durgar a much richer existence, I think, in this book, specifically as nemesis to not only the dwarves, but to Drow and the Dark Elves. As that was kind of their agreement they made with Asmodeus was, we'll help you fight Lolth, because Lolth is a demon and devils don't like demons. And you give us power to get rid of the Mind Flayers. And yeah, they just do a really cool job of kind of showing the antithesis, right, of dwarven society in there. It also would be really interesting then maybe to play like a renegade Durgar. That's one of the things that these chapters did a really great job of to me, is inspiring cool characters that you could play, right?
You want to play your Drist Durgar?
Well, maybe a Durgar who's actually like reconnected with Moradin somehow. You know, like I don't know the full. I know more of the story of the elves. I don't know the full story of the Durgar, but I imagine part of the whole "lol, you're not welcome back" was because they made a deal with the devil. Like I imagine that has to weigh in, but they
I mean that would make sense, but it isn't discussed. I could definitely get behind a Durgar cleric of Moradin. Would be, I think, a really cool character. But overall, in terms of like
redemption paladin, like boom,
that would also be that would be perfect.
Yeah.
On the whole, in terms of like building dwarves in the light of what's here, I think a lot of people are going to read this and they're going to think, well, I think it's not going to change the way people play dwarves externally. They kind of come out as being a lot the same as the way everyone imagines them. These kind of like boisterous, jolly, sometimes grumpy craftsmen, a little bit xenophobic because they spend all their times isolated in their own communities under mountains. And I think that is still going to come across, but you get this extra nuance that the book gives you that informs why they act the way that they do. Like there's a really excellent quote about dwarven clans that's in the book. Every chapter kind of begins with a little quote. I don't think we've read any of these yet, but here's the one that I really liked, which is from like, basically it just seems like it's a random dwarf. I don't know if Tordek is in particularly significant, but the quote is, "So the barman isn't a relative, and you don't even know the names of any of the folk here. How can you possibly sleep peacefully in this inn surrounded by strangers? We'll be lucky to see the morning." And that kind of idea that these dwarves spend their entire lives surrounded by a clan, which is essentially just one step away from family. It's a very strangely sheltered environment for such like hardy and burly people. Like I said, I think it adds a lot of context to why dwarves are the way that they are, and can help kind of the internal decision making a lot for players when building dwarves. I really liked it on the whole.
I mean,
for sure.
Saying in chat, I'm really liking the Tome of Foes. It's helping me to fill in some pieces in my campaign. I feel like if you were trying to run a dwarven like citadel, you have an idea of what you want to do, but like when your players show up and they're in the dwarven citadel and they're walking around, you kind of might be at a loss, right, as to like what is going on just ambiently there.
Yeah, passively.
This book gives you a really great feel of how dwarven culture is, right? Not just what's there, because you know what's there. Oh, there are blacksmiths and there are X and Y and Z. It gives you a good idea of like the tone of it, right? Talking back like how we felt about the hell section. But yeah, I super dug it. I mean, overall it's great. I mean, let's talk, Pete, about the tables in the back. For all the other sections so far, we've kind of just glossed over these tables here.
I also liked these tables.
But damn, the player role tables for like cool, interesting little tidbits. Pete, you had one in particular.
Yeah, I had one I really loved. There's some dwarven quirks that they have a whole table of them. They're all pretty good. My favorite one was the first one, and it's just roll a d8. Your quirk is water from the sky. It always surprises you. It's just very cute, and it fits the dwarven character. When I mentioned it before, Jeremy's saying like, yeah, I can see myself playing that character that thinks that way.
It's just the rain.
I'd forgotten how the rain came down like that. I'll get used to it one of these days.
But yeah, it's pretty.
I feel it in my heart.
Dwarf
also,
section, 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. Can I do one more thing in the dwarf section?
Oh, please.
I really loved the caravan table. Do you remember that one for like building like a little dwarf caravan that might have some reason to go out into the world? It seems like a great random encounter if you need one. Just roll on the dwarven caravan table and get a group of people that are out doing some particular task. And it's just a great like quest hook as well, because you can be like, oh, you run into the dwarven caravan. That dwarven caravan is leaving from a dwarven city that they can tell you about and why they're leaving it. Like,
yeah, maybe they're traitors, maybe they're fleeing. It's cool either way. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this chapter is, they go into a whole lot about clans and how their like system works, the dwarf system. But they also talk about what happens when clans kind of falter and break apart. And I think that's really important, right? Because that's kind of the deal with D&D, right?
Yeah.
It's a moving, changing world. And so, yeah.
If every dwarf city that you came across was perfect and like the ideal of a dwarven city, then that's just unrealistic. We didn't talk about gods. We want to do that?
I think
we probably have to move on. I'm satisfied. Yeah, fair enough.
We'll talk about on the others. They're cool.
Spend a lot of time on Abathor, who's like an evil god who ends up being really important in their society, which was unique. I just recommend reading it at some point. But it's kind of cool that they had an evil god that was like one of their prime gods.
One more thing, I'm sorry. Awesome part they put in the dwarf chapter is they talked about different dragons. And
yeah, that was cool too.
Dragons love gold. Dwarves have huge treasure hoards. They talked about how each of the different types of dragons, how likely they would be to ever interact with the Dwarven Citadel, and then how those dragons would go about overcoming the dwarf. Right? The slow war of attrition, which I think is just really cool. But we got to move on. We can't stick on Dwarf River. Let's talk a little bit about the Gith. In the Gith section, they talk about the 2 different subraces of Gith, the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai. Both are incredibly powerful psionic races. They're in a not dissimilar way from the Durgar, were once enslaved by mind flayers, in which they gained their psionic power. And the biggest, the Gith culture is very different between the 2. And it talks a lot about the hierarchies, right? How the 2 different societies work, the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai. They're very different. There's not a lot of similarity between them anymore at this point.
The
biggest
they look a lot alike.
Is the history was so wishy-washy in this section. I really wanted to hear, because all throughout Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, whether it's the elves or the dwarves or the devils and demons, they talk about why. Not just what a race is or a place is or a god. They talk about why things are the way they are, right? All kind of going into this theme of the balance of things in the multiverse. And in the Gith section, and Pete, let me know your opinion on this too, but in the Gith section, they really don't tell you why. They keep teasing it and almost saying it. It felt like they were just intentionally holding stuff back. And I really hated that. Like, I actually disliked that quite a bit.
I was 100% on the same page as you. I like at the very beginning, they start establishing, for example, the kind of prime god of the Githyanki, Gith, the person for whom their race is named. And they talk about how this person, how they were kind of freed by mind flayers, and then at some point, Gith went off to forge a contract with Tiamat, who is the god of evil dragons, the goddess of evil dragon, what have you. And then they just kind of say that Gith disappeared after that point. Gith never came back, and then, you know, apparently they had forged some kind of contract with Tiamat, and now red dragons align themselves with the Githyanki.
Yeah.
But then Gith was
leader
just
of the
kind of
Githyanki went with Gith to do it, and then that's when the split happened between the Gith Zerai and the Githyanki. Was when Gith disappeared. And it's just like they actually go to great detail in this book to bring it back up, right? They start the chapter talking about that, and then later in the chapter they talk about Gith again, saying, oh, the truth of Gith is unknown. Even the most powerful mages who have attempted divination magics have gone insane and turned into elites, which are a new monster in the book.
But we're not mages, we're gods. We should know where Gith is.
Yeah, like, don't talk about it if you're not going to talk about it. They keep bringing it up. They're trying to hype it up. It really feels like they have something in mind for this in the future. They take a disproportionate amount of time talking about the Githyanki over the Githzerai, in part because the Githyanki are more active, right? They are evil. They're tyrannical. They live on a super badass city built in the body of a dead god.
I gotta give credit to Tunaroth. Was really cool.
Yeah, Tunaroth is super sick. They're ruled by a lich queen that lives forever and makes herself more powerful by draining the souls of her most powerful subjects. Okay.
Kind of can get behind it, yeah.
Yeah,
Vlakith.
Cool. The thing is, they just set up the entire Githyanki thing of like, the Githyanki are founded upon this war and conquest, and Vlakith's decree that the Githyanki should rule over all the material planes. Except they don't do anything because they just sit around and Tunaroth where time doesn't travel and where time doesn't move, and they just hang out and get bored and complacent.
And for anyone who don't know anything about the Githyanki, kind of their aesthetic, they live in the astral plane. They have this really cool city that's basically built on the body of like an ancient petrified god. And they are astral pirates is the closest thing you can call them. They fly around in these airships and they hunt mind flayers is sort of their whole deal. They're a warrior race. They're extremely competitive, extremely fierce. But they set up another thing about the Githyanki that didn't quite catch with me. And while it's interesting, it didn't like seem fun or exciting to like do stuff with per se. And that was that the Githyanki are defined by this strange apathy. And like Jeremy was mentioning before, it feels like they were kind of building up to something with this. Like they're saying the Githyanki right now are just kind of sitting, wasting away on their homeworld, really bored and waiting for a time of war. And it feels like later on in maybe a future book, they're going to be like, and now it's the Gith's time of war. In this book, the Githyanki's revenge. Or, you know, something along those lines. I'm sure the name will be better.
It feels just like really heavy-handed foreshadowing. And in a book that you bought to get lore and information about things, I think it was pretty lame to do it like that.
But yeah, it's just like, it's a cool idea. I just can't get excited about running Githyanki just because of that apathy. They're kind of in that weird, you know, pensive, very like, it all seemed very gray.
They're not very engaging is the problem.
Yeah.
That being said, I will say, the Githzerai were done pretty well. They're pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
I think they do a really good job talking about how they rule through limbo. I think, unlike Vlakith, who they tried to shroud in more mystery than she needed to be, they did a real good job saying just enough about the Githzerai leader, whose name I'm trying to find.
I wrote it on the... I'm sorry, I forgot to bold it.
Gith.
Yes.
Sorry. They did just enough they talked enough about him to make you think like, wow, this is an interesting character. Just an incredibly ancient, aged being. One of Mordenkainen's little notes, which appear throughout.
I was just gonna mention the same one.
Oh, please.
Oh no, you take it. You take it.
Oh, I don't have the precise words.
Okay, well, I'll grab it then.
Yeah, you grab that, but yeah, they just do a really cool job of like. The Gith Zerai are these beings of order. They live in limbo, which is a plane of utter chaos, and they exert their mental, their psionic ability to transform limbo into anything that they desire. They can transform the chaos stuff of limbo into anything. And I think
the direct quote.
Cool. Yeah, please. This is an awesome little note.
Yeah, this is a sweet quote. This got me. This I thought was cooler than anything they said about Menyara Gith was Mordenkainen's opinion of him, which was, I couldn't discern if the Gith Zerai leader was alive, dead, or undead. But the psychic stress in his audience chamber was so intense that I could barely think. Did that pressure come from Menyara Gith, or from the dozens of followers that surrounded his body? Alas, I left with that thought and my original question unanswered. Just like, it was too intense meeting with this individual for even the legendary wizard Mordenkainen to even remember why he went in there in the first place. Just very cool.
It's just sick. Yeah. Additionally, as cool as the Gith Yankees like Red Dragon Knights are, like, those are neat and all, but I really think that those pale in comparison to the fucking adamantine fortresses of the Gith Yankee. So when the Gith Zerai have attacks on like the material plane, or they go out in the material plane to raise their children, because the astral plane is timeless, so things don't age. But when they do that, they have these red dragon mounts. That's the Gith Yankee. What the Gith Zerai do is they use their incredible psionic ability to conjure an adamantine fortress in limbo and then just teleport it into the prime material plane. So they have this impenetrable ultra fortress. They have these powerful leaders called anarchs, my apologies, that are inside of the fortresses that bring bits of limbo with them to continue to sustain and build whatever they need to while they're in the material plane. It is just so freaking cool.
The thing I loved about that piece of lore was, I think that's the closest thing in the D&D lore to like alien invasion, because like anyone, because there's not like, I don't feel like the Gith Zerai, and I don't know, it seems like there are not common knowledge. Most people don't know that there are Gith Zerai that are these like ancient order of monks that reside in limbo. And they do. The kind of noses and the ears and like the bald green heads and or I guess they're not all bald, but a lot of them have like the shaved green heads. They're very like classical alien. Yeah, I do too. And then there's just like, you might be moving through the desert and it says it kind of destroys the land around, like the psychic energy ends up like destroying the land around the fortress. You're going through the desert and there's just this like massive floating like black prism. It reminds me of like the cover of the movie District 9, if any of you have seen that. I picture just, it feels like aliens in D&D.
Yeah. I mean, on top of that, the fact that they aren't good nor bad. They're very neutral.
Yep.
They're just incredibly lawful neutral. They will not hesitate to destroy Gith Yankee, even if that means just obliterating innocent bystanders. They will destroy the Gith Yankee at any costs, which I think is really cool. Oh my gosh, Dana, you're upset. I'm sorry,
how do you feel? How do you feel about the Gith as player characters, since the player races were in for them? I really don't
like it. I think that as cool as they are, I think
they're better NPCs.
I think they're way better NPCs. Because if you're gonna play a Gith player character, in most circumstances, you have to totally separate your character from this super cool lore. Because the super cool lore means you're either super evil or really weird. Like why would you go adventuring with these stupid people if you can be, you know,
to play a Gith the way that you would want to play a Gith and the way that they are in this lore, you'd have to like really be working with the DM and have a game that was like built around the story of the Gith. Like,
yeah, I completely agree. That being said, they're cool. I mean, they're sick.
The race options I like the race options. The things that they can do are pretty rad. Like the Githyanki get like a jump spell, and I can't remember what the other one was. And then like the Githzerai get a shield. Like they can all do a psychic shield. I don't know. I liked it. They get an invisible mage hand on the Githzerai, so they can use their telekinesis.
They both get that, yeah, as a sort of.
Oh, did they both get that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what Infinite Taco was saying in chat, right? You would need to have a very specific campaign for Gith player characters if you care at all about this lore.
Yeah.
Now, you might say in your setting, the Gith are just psychic people, and that's just who they are. And sure, great. These make great stat blocks for psychic characters.
Yeah.
Cool. But if you want to use any of the rich lore that is in here, it's going to be really hard to actually do that.
Yeah, and that seems like why I would want to play a Gith if I was ever going to do that.
Yeah. Oh, true.
Want to start talking about anything else? Anything else you got on the Gith?
I mean,
I think we covered everything I want to talk about.
The biggest thing for me, right, is as cool as the section was, they go into a lot of great detail about Tunarath, the Githyanki city, talking about the construction of it, how it is kind of almost dilapidated to a degree, that there are little settlements of other races that were slaves, that the Gith just got bored with having as slaves, which is so, like, it's very alien. Like, the concept of Githyanki society is alien, which is really weird.
I think it says a lot that the thing that got me the most excited in the whole section on Tul Narath, the thing that I was the most excited about was a little blurb they put in there about this Modron run hotel of renegade Modrons, where they trade like just precious objects and like interesting curios for room and board. So like the thing I liked the most in the Githyanki section had nothing to do with the Githyanki.
It had to do with their culture, though.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. At Tunarath, I think would be like, it's set up to just be so sick. There's an evil dread queen that's literally unkillable, but she doesn't care about what goes on in the city, and it's just this space Tortuga on the body of a dead god. Like, so cool. Really nice place. That's
about as high as your fantasy will ever get.
Yeah, exactly, before you become sci-fi. Sorry, I dropped frames when I went to make a statement about Spelljammer. Spelljammer. Q4, calling it. Still calling it. Yeah, let's move past the Gith. We're cool.
Yeah, that means we get to go to our both of our favorite thing. I believe this was yours as well.
I loved the halflings. They were
the halfling section was so good.
I really, this won't look good on the stream, I bet. But I'm gonna go ahead.
Hold up the book.
Ahead. I'm gonna hold up the book, and I'm gonna regret it. But what's that? Where's that first picture? The very first picture.
Oh, the first picture is so adorable. Oh man, I want to be friends with every single halfling. Let's start talking about.
They are.
Let's start talking about halflings. So this last chapter is on halflings and gnomes. They don't tie in and kind of interweave the way the other ones do. They're just kind of like two distinct parts on the respective races. So for anyone who's not familiar with halflings, just to set the kind of the bar, a halfling, I mean, halflings are the hobbits from Lord of the Rings. They're almost exactly that. They're just delightful, very small people that live in peaceful villages and love telling stories and love relaxing and eating and drinking and spending time with their families, and just, taking it slow and appreciating the small things in life. And that's what a halfling is. And it's just so great, and I love them.
That's all there is. They're great.
So the only really big piece of lore that comes out in this is Yondala is the kind of the prime halfling god. They talk about other gods, of course. There's one in particular I think I'll talk about eventually that I really liked. But there is Yandala, who is the prime halfling god, and it's supposedly from Yandala that the halflings get all of their luck. But the thing I really loved about Yandala is that, unlike all the other creation myths, it wasn't like Moradin forged the dwarves literally with metal and fire. Yandala just was a goddess that found the halflings, that just saw them kind of timid and afraid walking around the world, was like, oh, these people are delightful, I need to take care of them. And just kind of binded them all together, taught them how to farm, and just decided that she was going to be the god of the halflings, which is so good.
It is pretty freaking awesome. I will say that one difference, right, between Yandala and all of the other creations really makes it stand out as just this one just excellent happy outlier.
Oh man,
it's
like I'm just so happy.
But yeah, no, I mean, this section is great. It talks a ton about what halfling culture or society really is. Small groups of like 100 or so halflings that all stay together and hang out. They talk about some of the other halfling deities and what an important role these other deities play in halfling culture. So one of them is Brandobarus. Brandobarus. God, I can't. I want to say Brandabas, but it's Brandobarus.
Brandalbas.
But yeah, Brandobarus, who is the halfling god of trickery and adventuring. And oh my goodness, he's there's, you know what, Roger Twee? I didn't sing a god of pipeweed, but I think
I feel like every halfling god, yeah.
But I love Brandobarus because he's the adventurer guy. And that's what he does. He just goes out and he adventures and explores the world, always in search of newer cool things. And I loved him because of how the book puts him as part of halfling society, right? If a young halfling has that kind of need to go adventuring, they've got a little bit of Brandobarus in him. Or, he's got happy feet and Brandobarus has the happiest feet. These little quirks, these little turns of phrases really, to me at least, help to make the gods feel like real things. Like if I were playing a society of halflings and I was talking and role-playing a halfling, having these little turns of phrases makes it feel so much more real, to me at least, right? Yeah. It helps to put up that veil of this is not a game, this is the world, lol.
Reading these things is a reminder as a DM to do that, because that's the kind of thing, these little tidbits that define a culture are, I think, what really makes the game, can make a game feel immersive and really start to come alive. And reading this reminded me of that in a major way. I loved
yes. I gotta respond to Roger Twee. By the way, Roger, welcome to D&D Time. I'm not sure I've seen you around hanging out, but welcome.
Hello.
Funny, they do talk about the cannibal halflings in Dark Sun. However, it's the section, it's really funny, right? Because they're going through the section talking about happiness and friendship and halflings are super lucky. And then they're halflings in other settings. And they're oh yeah, in this setting, they're still happy and lucky. In this setting, they're still happy and lucky. In the Dark Sun, they're vicious cannibals with an insatiable lust for humanoid flesh. The only thing that makes them more uncomfortable is the thought that other creatures also may hunger for their flesh just as deeply. The tone.
I did not know that piece of lore.
Shift. Oh yeah, it is excellent.
All the little quotes from Mordenkainen in this section are excellent. Mordenkainen, my apologies. He hates the halflings, and it comes across his little notes, just
you've got one,
when
right?
they're talking about all the adorable, when they're talking about all the adorable halfling superstitions, and I just got through. It's they leave seeds on the ground when they're going through forests for their god of nature, Shira Periroyal. And then it's like, oh, they put flowers in their hair to ward off dark fairies. And then just immediately after, I was just smiling after all that stuff. It was just Mordenkainen going, I don't believe in luck. None of the ridiculous superstitions halfling put their faith in has any value whatsoever. Just so good.
Super blunt. And there's another one later on, which I love, that goes with that. The reason halfling settlements, they're talking about how halfling settlements rarely get attacked, surprisingly. Maybe because they're off the beaten path, maybe because they aren't worth attacking, or in Mordenkainen's idea, maybe because they're lucky. Or to Mordenkainen, maybe because halfling settlements survive wars, because halflings are so irritating. Why conquer something you want nothing to do with? Just like
it's so good.
Little quip.
Oh, so good.
I loved that. It gave the chapter so much character, having Mordenkainen just fucking hate halflings.
And it made me feel all the better about how much I liked them.
Well, Roger, maybe that's true, but this is, the halfling god of luck and Tamora are two very different people. So, or actually, was it Taiki that? I don't know. Ooh. Anyway,
can you read more Mordenkainen's quotes in Bartholomew's voice? Next time, anytime I read a Mordenkainen quote, I'll start doing it in Bartholomew's voice.
One other god that they talk about that I think is really cool, and I'm going to lead in, and Pete, I'll let you jump in with the big ones, with the battle tactics.
Yes, okay, yeah. Arverine, please take it away.
They talk about the halfling god of, like, what's the domains here? Vigilance and war.
The halfling war god is so good.
And like, first, the idea of a halfling war god is just hilarious. But the way they weave it into society, just like they did with Brandabaris, they do it with Averine. And the halflings don't train, right, in the normal sense like other races might. But they sit around and they tell stories. And in these stories, there's like a troll which attacks an old halfling village. And the people, the halflings, I don't know, beat it with torches and it dies or runs away. And through these stories, they teach the other halflings how to deal with these precarious situations. Whether it be trolls or goblins or what have you, all of it's kind of told about through stories. And that kind of inspires young halflings to go out and like play out these stories and inadvertently train, which is really cool. I love how it all fits into this very innocent, fun overall feel that I think works for the halflings. But Pete,
some of the battle tactics. They go through and talk about some of the ways halfling villages defend themselves, and they got all these like funny names. There's the turtle shell, which is where halflings cluster together and cover each other with shields, wash tubs, and wheelbarrows, coffer lids, and anything that can deflect a blow, as they all just huddle in this pile of shields and just slowly kind of like push the thing out of the village. One of my favorite ones was Fiddle and Crack, where they just have a halfling fiddler stand and like draw the attention of the dumb ogre, and they catch it in a pit, and then the big strongest halflings come up with big clubs and just beat it in the pit. Clubs. They just like hit it until it gets like tired and runs off. Like the little picture that they have in this section, it's like a big giant ogre, and there's just a bunch of like what looks like enchanted like kitchenware that's being thrown at him as he runs away in terror. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like an animated table and some animated pots and pans. It's just great. This whole subchapter on halflings is amazing. It was so fun to read. Gave a ton of what I thought was super useful lore if you wanted to be a halfling or use halflings in your game. Just excellent. Just great.
One more little piece that I want to talk about halflings. So I assume we don't even want to talk that much about gnomes.
Go ahead, Pete.
The story circle. They talk about how halflings have a story for everything, and one of like the greatest things an adventurer can wander into is a halfling story circle where each halfling kind of like gathers around and tells a story, each one trying to like outdo everyone else, telling stories of how their clan came together, telling stories of the gods, of famous halflings. And it's something that I'm immediately going to put into my game at the first opportunity I have to throw a halfling village at my players. It just seems so fun, and it, like, on the subject of great plot hooks, literally just tell them a story, tell them a legend that they can then partake in, or any kind of story. Like, it's literally just come and listen to all of our plot hooks and also have a great time doing it because it seems so fun and lighthearted and just warm.
Speaking of warm and lighthearted and happy, that is the opposite of the tone of the rest of this book, except for, sort of, the gnomes.
Talk about gnomes.
Disclosure, I personally have an immense amount of trouble rationalizing tinker gnomes, or rock gnomes, or whatever you want to call them. They don't make sense to me in terms of, like, these creatures wouldn't be alive in the world because of, they just don't make sense. Nothing about them makes sense to me. So, full disclosure, I hate them. I love forest gnomes, but tinker gnomes, just they don't cut it for me. The first problem I have with the gnome section is it's short. There's not a lot.
Yeah, it didn't feel like they had as much love put into this section as they did like the section before.
Yeah, like the first 2 pages is just general stuff about how gnomes love learning and secrets, and discovery is their biggest thing. And I'm down with that. I'm cool. That sounds great. I dig that. I get it. They talk a little bit how they're like a little secretive, but sure. And they're into, if they do make beautiful stuff, right? They want to make, the gnome section is short. Well said, Freynour.
Nice. If I could give you a point of inspiration right now, I would.
But they spend some time talking about how if a gnome is interested in beauty, that they're going to be interested in it for beauty's sake, not for much else, right? In terms of how they can innovate and make something new. And I think that's neat. I think they do a pretty decent job talking about that.
Kind of that drive to create.
Yeah. It's just there's not a lot of it. They don't talk about it for very long. And they don't talk about why. Like I was talking about with the Gith, right? Where they talk a lot about the what, but they don't say any of the why, and so it feels kind of hollow. Like they've left something out. That's how this gnome section feels. They talk a lot about what gnomes are like, but not why they're like it. At least not in a way that satisfied me. Pete, do you want to jump in with something more positive about the gnomes?
I mean, we can talk about the forest gnomes. Just to say one. Yeah, the forest gnomes were very cool. They talk about how they did a good job of focusing on like kind of the illusion aspects of the forest gnomes, and how they, like, you get the impression that forest gnomes speak as much in their natural abilities to make illusions as they do in just kind of their normal tongue. Like, they also mention that forest gnomes do these storytelling circles as well. But for forest gnomes, it's like a visual and auditory experience, because each one like tells a story, like weaving illusions as like comfortably as they think. So there's just like all of these arrays of colors and strange sounds, which was really kind of cool. They talk about how they use illusions to like hide their homes, and how it's almost impossible to like find a forest gnome home. Jeremy, did you read the little blurb about the pool?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about right now, actually. Yeah. One of the things I loved is it's not just magical illusions, it's also practical illusions. So one of the examples they gave, a gnome warren may have a skylight that's just a large glass like hemisphere, which is the bottom of a little pool with little fish swimming around, and it reflects the light in all sorts of cool ways. And they got a big fish tank on their ceiling, but from the surface in the forest, it just looks like a pool of water. And it's just a really awesome really cool little touch, right? Because first, that's so neat. I want that. That's all. I want it.
Well, also, like, imagine how excited a player would be if you see them resting in a thing, and you have them resting in a campsite, and there's like a little pool of water next to them. and they're like, at some point, you don't build it up at all. They just say, oh, I'm gonna grab some water from the pool. Like, as you're looking in, make a perception check, and I just picture them like going into the rabbit hole of finding this, like, wait, what is this pool? Why is there glass at the bottom of it? And they like go in deeper into it, and there's just like a bunch of gnomes that are like sleeping in a little bed underneath it. It's just, oh man, it seems really cool.
It's pretty great. Another thing that actually was really good about the gnome section, their deities. Sort of. The
overarching,
deities,
yes.
Yeah, please.
Oh no, you take it. I just went for a while.
The overarching feel of their deities was great. The idea that the gnome gods are basically just a party of adventurers. They go about on silly little adventures throughout the multiverse. Garl Glittergold, who's their leader, and the chief gnome deity, is the one who encourages all of the other gnomes to be adventurous and to go out on these silly quests. And I think that is awesome. The idea that you can run into the gnome gods, like you can just use them and have them be masquerading as just a bunch of random gnomes adventuring. It's super cool.
They mentioned how they would send Garl Glittergold back to, like, actually he would send an avatar to resolve like minor clan disputes and stuff. Like,
I mean, it's just really cool. Garl, they did a great job talking about him and his place in gnome culture. But a couple of the qualms I did have, and I see that comment about kobolds, Roger. I'm going to get to that in a moment. One of the problems I had with the gods is specifically Kalardran Smoothhands and Flandal Steelskin. Those are two of their gods. Smoothhands is the patron deity of the deep gnomes, who, by the way, I love that the deep gnomes aren't just other evil creatures like all the other Underdark variants are. They're just other gnomes that are a little more sullen because they live in the Underdark, which I love. I like that.
Yeah, understandable.
But I digress. The gnome gods, rather than getting like half a page like the other deities, they get a paragraph each. So very, very little. You get like one interesting tidbit that defines the gnome deities. Like, for perspective, that's it. Maybe you can see just like one of these. Yeah.
You don't get as much time to like really learn about and like, and it also doesn't like talk about them in the way the other ones do, or like how people worship them and like what it is to like meet these gods in society, because they're different, but also it makes it a little bit harder to like connect with them.
Well, the thing that I really disliked about Kalardar and Smoothhands, right? They have this tiny little space. They give you one tidbit to like, this is his shtick. And that shtick is Kalardar and Smoothhands got his hands perfectly smooth by rubbing a gem. And that gem was the heart of Ogremok, who is the elemental prince of Earth. And Kalardar and Smoothhands stole his heart because it was beautiful, and that kind of ties into like the deep gnomes going underground and going deep beneath the surface for gems. Mm-hmm. So cool. That ties in. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
The problem is the next god directly underneath him listed, Flandal Steelskin, stole the heart of Imix, the elemental prince of fire, to forge weapons. And it's just like, man, I get it. You sat down to brainstorm gnome gods, and you came up with this cool idea of, oh, how about they stole the hearts of these elementals? And like two different people at that meeting said, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm going to write up a deity about it. And they both wrote up different deities, and they ended up both in the same book, right underneath each other, and no one proofread it to say, oh, shit, we used the same idea twice. And we didn't put like a motif that tied it together. To me, at least, that pulled back the curtain of I don't know. It was jarring for me, and it felt like they didn't care as much about this section, even though it was obvious they didn't. I was super yeah, right. There was a strict deadline on Gnome Day. I'm with you, Infantux. That's how it felt. And actually, that happens a second time in the Gnome Pantheon. First with Garl Glittergold's magical axe, which they just kind of, in a sentence, say, he's got a magical sentient axe that can cut through any substance.
And I wish they had talked about the personality of the axe.
Which, yeah, they don't go into any more detail about it. It's one sentence. And then, later on, for a different gnome deity, they talk about Segojan. His name is Segojan Earthcaller. Segojan contributes to the group through his healing abilities and restorative powers of his meals. And on many occasions, the other gnome gods call upon him to use his ability to burrow through any substance. Okay, look, I get it. Like, it's cool. He's supposed to be a burrower. Let him have that. Don't also give that to Garl Glittergold for no reason. And don't use the same goddamn terminology. Like, I
think they could have just rephrased it and even said, like, they could ability to burrow. They could have just not said through any substance.
Yeah, like, it's the same phrasing. It's the same shtick. You know, if you're going to do that, maybe put in a little note saying, in stories, it is said Segojan Earthcaller is often confused for Garl's axe, or referred to as the axe of Garl Glittergold. And then, wow, okay, cool. You've now made this into like a mythic lore kind of deal. Where is he a person? Or is he an axe? Are they animals?
And that feels cool.
Yeah, no, I get you, Infinite Tacos. Burrowing's different than cutting. But if you cut a lot, you burrow.
Hashtag well, actually.
The point is, I thought it really pulled back that veil and made me feel like, all right, this section didn't get the love that the other ones did. And that disappointed me. That, like, more than
the evil god.
Bothered me. Oh my god.
The evil god was kind of funny. He's like... It was like his name was Erblin because he didn't come on an adventure one time. He wanted to stay home and do his own thing. And Garl Glitter was, you're banished from the adventuring group. And as a result, like, they talk about how there's a bunch of different stories for him. And as a result of him not coming, like, some other person, you know, one of the other gods had some, you know, tragedy befall them. And it's different every time. Like, one lost their hand. One of them, like, caused one of them to get like some kind of affliction that made them like need to get new skin. I think it was Flandel that had to do that.
Dude, that was weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And then they even specifically say
that they didn't put in there.
Yeah, and they even say at the end of it, and the story always ends with, and that's why Garl put Erblin into exile. It's literally just like the gnome parents telling gnome children, don't be bad or you'll end up like Erblin.
Well, and it's what's so jarring about this story, right, is compared to the halflings we just read, right? They, on an off little note in the halfling section, they talk about how clans tell stories about how they got their names. And in that section, they gave a little poem, or maybe it's a song, or it's a cool little like 8-stanza thing about the story of the fish skippers and how they skipped a fish across the water and it killed a troll. And so like, it's a fun little song that you can just like sing. I could see an NPC in a world singing that, and it made that little silly note of halfling families sing about their names and where they come from. It made that like feel way more important and valuable than it was, where this one just felt so lame. It's just like something bad happened. It literally says, and then also at the end of it, so that's why he's banished. Like,
also, like, there's a weird part where they don't explain, like, eventually in his misery, he turns into a giant evil mole creature, which is also kind of just, there wasn't, like, a lot of, like, continuity there.
Wait, Jeremy, all this mayonnaise. I'm with you, Roger. We gotta get through the mayo.
Can I make a couple of other comments about halflings that I forgot to talk about that I love?
Sure.
They made a couple of Lord of the Rings nods in here that I wanted to point out because they were great, where they talk about, like, whether the situation, they're talking about, like, halflings doing things, whether the situation requires a rogue slipping into a dragon's den. Yeah. And then there's a point where they talk about halflings that go wrong, and they talk about, you know, halflings who pursue a dark path, lose the protection of Yondala, and some say the minds of these halflings eventually become twisted, and they turn into cruel, paranoid creatures racked by misery and despair, which is clearly a Gollum illusion. Yeah. Which is just cool.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, reading through this section, I was just super harsh on it because I'm a very critical person. I loved the section. Despite the fact that I have these very specific things that I really didn't like. Overall,
and particularly
the
forest gnomes were very good.
Yeah, the forest gnomes as a whole were excellent. Talking about their gnomish warrens and the little quirks of their societies. Great. And of course, the halflings were awesome. It's a little disappointing that this episode has to end talking about the gnomes. Maybe we should have saved the halflings for last. It would have been a much brighter end. But overall, let's talk about how we felt about... So
we've kind of pretty much done the whole book.
Last minute rewrites completely changed the nature of the sex-obsessed gnomes. Sordid, sexy history that Carl originally wrote. Ooh, boy.
Oh, God.
If only. No. Anywho, I loved this couple chapters. It was great. I thought it was a lot easier to read than... not that the elves were hard, but...
Yeah. I don't know. It was just fun.
Like a story to me.
Yeah, and I think that was intentional in a lot of places. Like the gnome section was very storybook-ish. Like, it read like a storybook. With Glitter Girl not feeling like a god, but like a character.
Like a fucking troll.
Yeah, I mean... Like the comment about him turning Grumsh's axe into braying donkeys. I mean, it's pretty funny. So, Jeremy, that it?
I think that's about it overall. I love reading this lore. It was really cool. I thought I got a ton of super useful information for my campaigns. And
me too.
If you're the kind of person that likes Tinker Gnomes, honestly, the gnome section's probably not that bad. In fact, you'll probably like it, but that ain't me. Yeah, that's really about it. It's a great book, super useful, actually easy to read, and entertaining, which I think it's the best of these so far. Compared to like Xanathars or Volos, I think this is the best of them yet.
Doing good work.
If you liked those, you're going to like this.
Next week, we're going to be tackling the bestiary, which, like we mentioned, we're not going to do the whole bestiary. It is huge. There are tons and tons of... Oh, my God. Erlin, you going to be cool about this?
You've seen through my adventures on Friday. I guess I can't run it now.
Oh, Jeremy, don't let that spoil your... I want to watch that adventure.
Yeah, more time on the GIF.
Spend more time on the GIF. The GIF are hilarious. And like kind of like the halfling section, it feels like the GIF are kind of in there to contrast all of the dark stuff that is in that section, because there is some dark stuff in that section.
Yeah, I mean, at least in these lore chapters, the dwarves are pretty happy overall, and the halflings are pretty happy overall. But
honestly, the devils weren't that unhappy.
In the bestiary, it's just everything's horrible. Everything is nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
So basically,
there's some spooky dudes in there.
We're each going to pick like 3 or 4 monsters, and then we're going to sit down and just talk about our favorite ones of them and like how we think we could use them in games, giving like kind of specific-ish examples, why we like them, and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, we're just gonna
we'll probably take a couple minutes at the beginning, just be like, we went through the bestiary on the whole, we liked it. I can't imagine us not saying that we liked it, basically.
There are a couple really bad monsters in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some duds.
Well, the Shadow Dancer is a particularly egregious example, but anyway.
I have not read that one, so I will have to check it out later.
Anyway,
should be fun.
Yeah, it should be great. If you liked watching DnDTime Talks, you should tune in to all of our other content. On Friday, we have Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, a series of 3 one-hour, one-off adventures run by Pete and myself and starring our viewers, aka you. If you're watching the show right now, or if have watched it at all today, you have earned points toward playing in Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. Every hour you watch gains you a point, and that's how we decide who plays in our games. It's just a base priority. If
you're a new player, we always give priority to people who haven't played with us before. So don't feel too intimidated about having to like watch a ton of the stream to jump in and see if you have fun playing with us.
Yeah, it should be pretty swag. I'm pretty excited. I'm always excited about D&D Time. And then on Sunday, Pete and I will be back again for D&D Time Brews.
Yes.
We will be putting together those race options at long last. I think hopefully we can bang out maybe 2 or 3 of them to like a very satisfying level.
At least 2.
Yeah,
we'll do more than 1.
Them bunnies are coming to town.
Yeah, it'll be bunnies and one more thing. Maybe we'll do like one of the more complicated ones that was going to have some sub races.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll see. It should be fun either way, and we'll make a cool race to use and to have.
Yeah.
You got anything else?
If you have any ideas of what you want to see in the race, make sure you're there on Sunday to chime in, because that's what we're doing. We're brainstorming with everybody else. Yeah, thanks, Roger. It's good to see you. Welcome to the crew. If you want to play,
thanks for hanging out.
On our website, we got links below the stream.
And also, Roger, thank you very much for following.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. We super appreciate that. The only way we really grow is through word of mouth and a random chance. So,
shill.
What?
Is this it? I was just saying, shill.
I'm not shilling. I'm just at.
I wasn't being sarcastic. I was being serious. I wasn't being mean.
I wouldn't say that's shilling. I think shilling is like, I love Coca-Cola. Drink Coca-Cola. But like, I'm not sponsored by Coca-Cola, so like that actually doesn't mean anything here.
And check out Dungeons and Dragons Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, available now.
Shilling. Yeah, we're shilling. But if you order in the next 5 billion years, it'll be the exact same price on Amazon.com. We don't have any affiliate links below, so we don't make any money from you buying the book. Okay, we're gonna stop now. We're getting crazy. Thank you all for watching. We super appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Pete, and this is D&D Time Talks.
Oh, shit, I forgot. Bye.
Good night, everyone.